so let's be honest, this election is not a walk in the park. With all the heated debates and the threats, and by that I mean the comment section of Facebook, it kind of seems like a hopeless cause to even bother voting. I mean, obviously our election system has failed us if this is what we're going to see. Luckily, we have a little-known secret weapon. It's called the Electoral College. Sorry. Okay, there we go. That's what I want. Okay, so before we continue with our conversation, let's kind of break down what exactly the Electoral College is. So the Electoral College is comprised of electoral votes that each state is given. So the total number of votes that we have in the United States is 538, which is the total number of members of Congress. So for each state, your electoral votes are determined by how many representatives you have in the House and how many senators you have, and each state has 2 senators. So for example, Pennsylvania, we have 18 representatives and 2 senators. Therefore, we have 20 electoral votes. So within each state, you have a mini election. So it's not a big, gigantic election across the board. It's 51, 50 being the 50 states, and the other one being the District of Columbia. 51 mini democratic elections, and the winner of those elections then gets the electoral votes in that state. So if a candidate won at least 51% or more of the vote in Pennsylvania, all of Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes goes towards that candidate. So it is a winner-take-all system. In generally all states, there are some states that have different rules, and those are a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to get into that today. But generally speaking, it's winner-takes-all across the board. A candidate needs at least 270 votes to win. So that's 50% of the electoral votes or more. But the reason why we have this system is because America is not a pure democracy. We say a lot, oh, America is a democracy. Technically, no. We are a representative republic, but we are founded on very democratic values, the idea that everyone deserves a chance to have some sort of say in their government. So a quote that kind of demonstrates why we don't necessarily have a pure democracy is given by one of our founders, Benjamin Franklin. And it reads, "Democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote." So basically what he's saying there is, in a pure democracy, it's very easy for the simple minority, being 41% of the vote or whatever, can very easily be oppressed and their voices silenced. And so liberty and the idea of a representative republic is protecting everybody's say. So the majority, the minority, every group. And so we do that a lot with checks and balances, and you see that a lot in how our government is structured. One of the big advantages that the Electoral College has is there's an incentive for candidates to look at the nation as a whole. Candidates, they campaign everywhere. You see them going from state to state to state to state across the nation. They're not strictly campaigning in just big population states and totally disregarding smaller population states. Because if they were doing that, then you'd only ever see them in, say, California, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. No, you see them in just about every state. Because they have to get as many votes as possible, so they have to invest time and energy into all those states. And it also forces them to look at swing states and safe states, again, because they need as many votes as possible. So then they're going to appeal to all those regions and peoples instead of just the concerns of heavily populous areas. They'll be more focused on the concerns of, well, everybody. Now, on the surface, the Electoral College seems really complex and very confusing. But if anything, it actually simplifies the system in comparison to a strict popular vote. For example, in the Electoral College, there's a very clear winner. It's nearly impossible to have a tie. Whereas in a popular vote, you could very well easily have a tie. And then if you did have a tie, who would be the tiebreaker? Or what would be the tiebreaker? Would Congress vote? Would the president vote? Would the Supreme Court decide? Who would decide that? The Electoral College is also more efficient, especially when it comes to recounts. Because a lot of the times when there is a recount, it's only in one state, not across the board. And again, if there was a popular vote, they'd have to recount all the votes in America. Like, remember in high school when it took your teacher like 3 months to grade like 25 Scantrons? Imagine if the principal had to grade all of the Scantrons in the entire school. You wouldn't get those Scantrons back till finals. Another advantage that the Electoral College has is a defense against voter fraud. Because it is technically smaller elections in each state, there's different voter requirements. Therefore, if someone was trying to vote illegally, they'd have to get the voter requirements in one state and in another state if they wanted to cross the border, and that can be really difficult if there are different requirements. Whereas in a popular vote, you would have to have some sort of standardized requirement everywhere, and it would be really hard to enforce that if it's the same everywhere. But say, hypothetically speaking, we did want to switch to the popular vote system. Because the Electoral College is written into the Constitution, we have to amend the Constitution. And that could take a long process, because how we do that is you need 2/3 of both houses' approval and the approval of 3/4 of all the states. And that can take a while, first of all, for all the discussion to go through one house and vote, and then go through another house and then vote, and then get sent out to all the states and have their discussions and their vote. It could take months, years possibly. Okay, so say we did amend the Constitution. Well, then we'd need some sort of structure in how this is going to work. So we'd probably need some new government institution or agency to oversee this all. So there would need to be leadership, structure, limits, who's going to appoint this leadership, and then that agency would have to come up with new standardized voter requirements across the board, and they'd have to figure out how polling places are going to be standardized, and it would be very, 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 very expensive to produce and enforce everywhere, from Alaska to DC, everywhere. But this whole argument boils down to the Electoral College maintains the spirit of American government. The founders were very, very, very careful about giving one group or one person all the power. If you look at our government today, all 3 branches of government have some sort of limit on what they can do and what they cannot do. And there is some way that one branch can counteract the actions of another branch. Same with all levels of government, federal, state, and local. There's checks and balances. No one has supreme power. The power is handled very carefully. And if you think about it, we, the people, we're the 4th branch of government. We kind of have the most say in our government. We decide who goes into the White House. We decide who gets to go to Congress. We decide who leads us at the state and local level. We have the most power. Voting is seen as power. But yet, we need some sort of check, some sort of institution or system that makes sure that we are responsible. With great power comes great responsibility. So there are checks on all forms of power. That's what the Electoral College is. It's another check on power so that no one is oppressed and no one's voice is unheard. So I'm not saying that this system is perfect. Nothing is ever going to be perfect. But the advantages of the Electoral College remind us of the very ideas that our country was founded on. That idea of liberty, and that we get to decide, and we have the responsibility to stand up for our choices. As Americans, we are entrusted with being the ones to decide our own future, to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Thank you.